All right, welcome back. Let's get into the Voters Hub. Now, last December, President Uhuru Kenyatta promised to mainstream people living with disability. Now, in an election year, do they feel seen and heard? Now, with issues surrounding freedom to move freely, stigma in the workplace, and access to healthcare, it can be argued that there is still more to be done to ensure persons living with a disability feel a part of this society. Well, joining me in studio now is Wanja Maina, member of the Jubilee National Executive Committee. Thank you so much for coming in, as well as Moses Kilonzo, chair of the People Living with Disabilities Lower Eastern. Thank you for joining me. I guess, you know, both of you are very familiar with how politics works, and it seems every election cycle, special interest groups come to the fore, but usually for very selfish reasons. You know, Wanja, from where you sit, you're literally within the heart of a political party. Do you feel that the interests of people living with disabilities are really taken seriously?
Thank you very much, Victoria. Always happy to be at Citizen TV. I would say that first and foremost, issues of special interest groups now, with the advances we've made in terms of law, they are actually part and parcel of political processes. For example, there's the Political Parties Act and the amendment therein for 2022, where having special interest groups in a political party is an issue of compliance, and it's also an incentive. For example, RPP is saying that the more you get special interest groups represented in the houses, that is in the assemblies and in the, you know, in the counties and in the Senate, it means more money to your political party. So then, just to sort of answer and say that indeed, with the progress we've made in terms of legislation, special interest groups are becoming part and parcel of political parties. That said, in our party, in Jubilee Party, this time around, there has been a 360 degrees change, whereby we had people with disabilities being invited to vie as aspirants and waiving the nomination fees. So we've seen people vying as senators, woman rep, a lot of MCAs. So there's a big shift, because in the past, we've always talked about where are we, but now we are opening the door wide and saying, if you want to vie, you would want to consider our ticket. So are we there yet? No. Is there positive progress and intentional decisions in terms of leadership of political parties? Yes.
Okay, you know, Moses, let me kind of keep on with that theme. You know, Wanja has just talked about how political parties are becoming open with the idea of bringing people or special interest groups onto the table, right, and making them a part of the process. But do you feel that translates to influence and you know, actual power in terms of getting things done beyond the constituents, for instance, who are people living with disabilities? Do you feel that that translates?
It doesn't, Vicky, because the problem with this country of ours has never been legislation. You know, we have so many rules in so many spheres, but implementation has always been, you know, the pertinent issue. And you look at the legislation on persons living with disabilities. We don't need laws more than what we are having right now, but they are not being implemented. I'm listening to my sister here talking about Jubilee Party and how they are waiving nomination fees for people living with disability. But the problem has never been the nomination fees for persons living with disabilities. The problem of ascending to power for people living with disability has been the perception out there. So these political parties have no deliberate measures, you know, to try and, you know, talk to their masses about these people living with disabilities and try to show that they are equal to their abled counterparts. And this is the cancer that is eating our politics today, because they are lacking the very important people in these political parties. Because when you talk about people living with disabilities, you're talking of people who have different capacities in terms of input into any political parties, because the talents that people living with disabilities possess are never in these abled people, and if they are there, they are not actually as refined as in people living with disabilities. And so if we are progressing, I'll say a big no, because the legislation is there, but there's nothing that has ever been done to try and move forward. You know.
Let me bring Wanja in there, because and just to get your response on that, you know, Moses has talked about just some of the challenges, perception, stigma that's attached to someone who's living with a disability. What other challenges would you say exist that would be barriers, not just for someone who wants to run, but even for a voter as well?
Okay, right. I think, Victoria, just to sort of talk about finances and nomination fees, it is actually an actual barrier. We didn't tell the people, we didn't say that we know that it's an actual barrier. It's the special interest groups who told us that it's a barrier. So waiver of nomination fee, world over, it has been known. You've seen almost all political parties in Kenya this time around have had that waiver, 50%, 40%. So indeed, it's a barrier when it comes to special interest groups. You know, Victoria, Article 100 in the Constitution talks about special interest groups. It places marginalized community and ethnic communities, people with disabilities, youth, women. But in the eyes of the law, it doesn't say that now because you're a woman, you are more marginalized than the other. So in the eyes of the law, all of us are in Article 100. That said, you've asked me about the challenges, finances, I talked about it. Just the general perception of who makes a better leader, socialization. In most of our patriarchal society, it's the male and the older people who are perceived to be holders of wisdom and leadership. Young people, the other day I was telling my peers that some of our proverbs, even in traditional African society, they say, when a young man is on top of a tree, and then an older man is down a tree, the older man sees further than young man on top of a tree. It sort of gives a reflection of how our society perceives young people and their ability to make decisions. But Vicky, you asked, so when those special interest groups, including women, people with disabilities, hold parties in positions in political parties, does it make a difference? A perfect example is a young man who was nominated by Jubilee Party to be in the Senate. His name is Gideon. I think he's vying somewhere else, but he got to parliament courtesy of being a young person in Jubilee Party. He's the one behind this legislation where they said that young people should not be told to come with HELB, EACC, and all those things when they are looking for a job. Right. This very same, there's this research NGO that is called Zalendo, whereby they placed some of the best legislators like Gertrude Msuruve of ODM, Sankok is one of the most active parliamentarians in that house. So then, if the people who are parliamentary watchdogs are noticing the efforts and the legislations and the activities of these special interest groups where they are in positions of parliament, then it goes without say that those people are very capable legislators, and that's why then we focus on the barriers. Let's give the waiver. Let's invite them to be in position of decision-making in political parties. And you've really talked about also voters, your average person who is voting, the physical infrastructure. I had seen that Wafula Chebukati IBC had talked about accessible voting booth, had talked about removal of such barriers. But then again, we have a long way to go because like in the West, people usually have the voting, I don't know, by email or by mail, where you vote and then you mail it to the place where it's done. We are not there yet as a country. So yes, based on our physical infrastructural barriers, maybe access to information, then some of these physical limitations limit people's civic and it's called suffrage when it comes to participation as voters.
You know, Moses, and let's open up the conversation now beyond the political space and just look at just the daily life when it comes to a person living with disabilities. Support. You know, we know there are several social protection programs that exist in this country. Do you feel they're adequate enough? And now in an election year, you know, there's a chance to actually push for more. What would you say needs to be done?
First, whatever exists is an upside down, kind of an arrangement. Why am I saying so? Vicky, just giving people, like 2,000 per month and saying that you are helping the physically challenged, then actually you are getting it wrong, because a physically challenged person is a human being. They need to pay rent, they need to buy food, they need to do everything. And so you need to come up with a framework that will see them, get jobs, earn a living, and get off the streets begging. And you've asked a very good question, Vicky. Now, let me tell you this, what I have always been advocating for and what I've always been feeling, that all these legislators who are being nominated to represent people living with disabilities, they know what persons living with disabilities go through to get a job. It's not easy. And so, if I was asked a legislation to just waive or to every business that is owned by a person living with disability be tax-free, it would go a big way in helping people living with disability.
Definitely, I want to stick on that whole issue. And Wanja, if you can also paint a very realistic picture of the socioeconomic state of several people who live in this country. People living with disabilities have far more challenges that cost money than the average Kenyan. What do we need to know in terms of those areas that need to be addressed?
Victoria, you've talked about social economic, and that's actually somehow related to my area of study. So it's a topic that I'm very interested in, social economic and sort of how they go together. Statistically, Victoria, according to research that was done by UNDP, only 1% of women and girls with disabilities have attained unliterate. Only 1% in sub-Saharan Africa. When it comes to the male, it is 3%. So what does that mean? That means for every 100, it's only one who is able to read and write. So what does that mean then? That means for as long as you're starting from behind in terms of education and skills, then we can now start projecting and say that you are last when it comes to access to health, access to job opportunities, access to skilled labor, access to to civic issues of your community. So then, if we start from there, then the barriers are, for example, parents discriminating their kids, not taking them to school. So the problems, so it's like a web of problems, but it all starts from the beginning when you're excluded from attaining education. And some of us, well, like myself, I'm very, very much interested in the area of education, because once a person is literate, then you can project how their future will be in terms of jobs, in terms of... But Victoria, when you still talk about the social economic, and now that we're in a very critical moment in the electoral cycle, I think then for those who are leaders, because we can't also paint a very dark picture, because even then, we are also not homogeneous. They are very young, vibrant people in universities. Yesterday, I had a group of students in Kenyatta University, and we had a very robust and very intense discussions. So this electioneering period and where we are in the electoral cycle, it also gives us an opportunity to interrogate the policies of the people who will be leading us in August. Let's say the social protection, the 2,000 that is talked about. The presidential candidate who is the presidential candidate whom we are supporting as a party is Baba. Baba has said that when he comes to power, he'll add 6,000 shillings as part of the Baba Care, Baba social protection in a household. Right. Then for a person who is always behind and a person who needs social protection, that is a policy that they are likely to warm up to, because it means more economic power in their own household. But then again, Victoria, I think moving forward now, and what I'm admiring is that how as a country we've embraced civic education. Even these televisions, every day when you go to even vernacular stations in Oro, there is a person who is like a lawyer, but they are speaking in vernacular, and people are sort of starting to understand and knowing the roles of their leaders. And so for us, at this critical moment in the electoral cycle, it is just looking at the candidates. And luckily, some of the people with disability are also aspirants. We even have a presidential candidate in the name of Ruben Kigame, and he was here on Citizen the other day. In Nairobi, Tim Wanyonyi is one to be governor. In Kajiado, we have an aspirant called Halim. She has a disability. So then it is incumbent upon us now to start listening and even getting the people who want to hold political power in August to tell us what is in for us, what is in for our children, what is in for making education accessible for all. Because it's really embarrassing, Victoria. Like the other day, I was having another parent who was talking with me. They have a 15-year-old who has never gone to school. In this very Kenya, where we are in a digital age, we are in 2021. So those issues are many, they are convoluted, but still the answer lies in the government that will come, because we know that the moment there is goodwill and there is a policy in place, things move a lot. So then we see the socio-economic issues, as you've asked me, are very closely related with the politics, the policy, and the budget.
I have to ask this as we wrap up, Moses. Last year the president talked about mainstreaming persons living with disability. And you wonder, what does that actually mean? And for you, what should that actually look like? That you feel satisfied that, yes, I am a part of this society. You see me, you hear me, you regard me. What does that look like for you?
It first starts from when a physically challenged person is maybe born. Now, Vicky, let me tell you something, and this is something that many people do not know. It's very expensive to take a physically challenged person to school, and especially a visually impaired person. These special schools are not everywhere in this country of ours. They are few, and they are concentrated in the urban areas and the developed areas. So it's so hard for a parent in a place like Turkana, when they give birth to a visually impaired child, to take that child maybe to Thika School for the blind. And again, after all that struggle, then when the kid arrives in school, you get like a Parkins machine, that is a braille machine, that is equivalent to a biro pen. It goes for a whooping 95,000 Kenya shillings. And you look at that, a parent has to buy that Parkins machine for that child. And again, braille papers, one ream of braille papers goes a good quality, goes actually for 1,000 Kenya shillings. And for those in secondary schools, they are currently using scientific calculators. A talking scientific calculator for the visually impaired persons is 55,000 Kenya shillings compared to 1,000 for those with sight. And so it is extremely expensive, to take a physically challenged child to school, and that's why even parents, when they get physically challenged children, they start feeling like it's a curse to them. So when we are talking of mainstreaming, I'd like first to see the government, tackle these issues, subsidize, the learning materials for these children. All the counties ensure that in every county there's at least one school with an integrated program.
And I mean, you raised some pertinent issues, and we hope this election cycle, our politicians are hearing you loud and clear. That something will be done past August 9th, 2022. But thank you so much for your sentiments and for sharing your insights, Wanja and Moses. Hopefully we can do this again. Keep the conversation going on social media. #VotersHub, #CitizenWeekend. We take a short break. Much more ahead. Stay with us.